and that's one of the things that I, especially the past couple of years, and especially as I've been writing about this, I've been looking for that. You can call it transmedia, you can call it multi-platform, however that type of storytelling that kind of moves around and also gives people power over it, there isn't a lot of it. There's a lot of experiments, it's expensive, and the stories aren't very good.
You know, we're talking about where it's going to go in the next 5 years, though, and I'm assuming some of this stuff will get figured out.
I think people will still experiment.
Again, I say, the quality of the creative has to rise to the occasion. You better be awfully damn good if you're going to...
You still have to have good stories.
Exactly.
I mean, you always still have to have a good story.
Good stories, and good stories that address the needs and the opportunities of the new presentation. And as for suspense, I'd like to, I'm sorry if I offend anyone here, but I'd like to quote Kurt Vonnegut, "Fuck suspense. Tell me what's happening." And that's, to me, it's like you have to change that mindset, that this is not a 22-minute per half-hour sitcom. We're not going to have the breaks at the commercials. You have to start thinking in a whole different way. If you're not ready to do that, then you're a dinosaur.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things that we've been trying, TV does a lot of the term I hate most in the world, but we do it as transmedia storytelling, because that's a horrible name, and if anyone can come up with a great name, I'll give you like $5, like right now. Eugene,
can we just call it storytelling?
Because you have to say it's storytelling in different media, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But, so we try a lot of stuff. We have a show called Haven, it's based on a Stephen King novella, and loosely based. And the guys, the executive producers called me up one day, and they were like, well, we want to do some kind of an extra story, and we want to use social media to do it. And I was like, okay, great. About half the producers in Hollywood want to do it, and about half are like, I have no freaking clue what you're talking about, right? So I work with the half that want to do it. And Ron Moore from Battlestar Galactica, really great at this stuff. So they called me up and they're like, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, first of all, like, what do you mean by social media, right? Because that's a whole thing. And so we kind of decided that they wanted to do something with Twitter. So I was like, okay, it's tough to do a narrative on TV and on Twitter. And you don't want to just do it in the medium, and you don't want to just, you don't want to half-ass it, basically. And I know some of the guys at Twitter, so we called them up. We had this big conference call, and we're like, what works, what doesn't work? And they told us a bunch of stuff that works. And a lot of their stuff is like put hashtags on the screen. And I'm like, well, that's not really going to get us into storytelling. So we finally devised this way, and it worked pretty well, actually. I was very pleased with the creative these guys came up with. I didn't have too much to do with it. But we told a story on linear TV. And the story dipped down into two of the characters who were on Twitter, who had joined Twitter, who would, in the story, join Twitter. We talk a lot about that. Like, they can't go on Twitter if they wouldn't be on Twitter. And then they have to say stuff on Twitter that they would say if they were the actual characters. And it was really great because they took these old two curmudgeonly newspaper reporter guys, and everybody on newspapers is on Twitter. You have to be on Twitter right now if you're in the news business. You just can't not, right? So like that made a lot of sense. And then they sort of did this story, and like the TV episode went along for 7 episodes. Twitter followed along for 7 weeks on sort of a parallel arc. And then they kind of dovetailed back in because we really wanted to make it pay off. One of the things that happens in a lot of these transmedia stories is that they don't really pay off in TV all that well because it's very hard to do, right? So we sort of planted the seeds, told the story on TV where it was in the background. It played out on Twitter, and then it actually wrapped up. And if you followed along, you were rewarded for playing on or for following along on Twitter. And now we actually have these 2 characters on Twitter, and the show's been greenlit for a 3rd season thanks to all the great viewers who are watching it. And so now we're going to really go into what they could do in the medium. And we sort of like literally dipped the tip of a toe into the water with that. But it's actually really hard to do, as I think these guys are sort of both saying in the same way. It's like, just because it's there doesn't mean A, it's going to be useful for anything, and B, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do it. It's really hard work. I mean, we had like conference calls going over, what would this character do at 12 o'clock at night? Would they be asleep, or would they be on Twitter? Like, you really kind of think it through. And then the weird thing is you see all this work around it, and then you kind of see it on your Twitter, and you're like, that was okay. You know what I mean? Because we're so at the beginning of the beginning that it's really hard to do. So, and Twitter is free, by the way. We can iterate the crap out of Twitter because, it's an open platform that anyone can do anything on. So we'll try again in the next season, but we were very happy with the way it turned out. But it's really hard to do this stuff well. It's really hard to make a good TV show. I mean, you guys know, you've seen TV. Well, shows aren't really that great. Not just single out any particular shows or networks, but, it's like 90% of everything on TV is really, really not that great. 99% of everything on the internet, like in that form, is really not that great right now. That's tied in. But then on the plus side, you get all the individual creators who are now empowered to do all new stuff. Like, you know, like, what's the guy's name who does the comic?
Randy Monroe, yeah.
He is freaking awesome, and he just basically created his own sort of mini form of comic telling, you know, and in his own style, and you know, that's his like, you know, livelihood now, and no one else will be able to do exactly what he did. Like, he needed those tools and his talent to match up. So that's really exciting.
So I'm going to put you all on notice. I'm just going to ask one really quick question down here.
Can I just, one more thing about transmedia?
No.
And I want to ask him about I want to ask him to tell.
But I want you guys to get ready to ask questions. But yeah.
So there's a guy in London where I live, Phil, who's been blogging Samuel Pepys' diary. Samuel Pepys was one of the great diarists of the Enlightenment. He wrote 1 million words of diary, and Phil Geifert puts up one blog post a day in synchrony with Samuel Pepys' diary. The interesting thing is that when he started doing it, it's a really good way to read the diary because it's a pretty intimidating 10 volumes. So first what happened was historians came and started annotating each one. And that was kind of cool and scholarly. But what was really funny is that people whom Phil doesn't know who they are, created Twitter accounts for the minor characters in Pepys' diary, like his wife, his mistress, his sister-in-law, and so on. And they started tweeting daily, incredibly funny Twitter responses to Pepys' diary entry of the day, and getting into huge fights, which is very funny, in character, which is my favorite bit of transmedia, because that was free. I wanted to ask you to tell the story about the BSG webisodes, because as I recall, you had like extra time on the set, right? You did them essentially like for peanuts.
Yeah, well, there's the first ones we did. We've actually done 3 series, but the first ones we did when we did the Battlestar webisodes, we had the writers and stuff like that actually write them and stuff. And the way that we shot them is we were on a set for the show, and we had what's called a splinter crew, which is a secondary crew shooting alongside the main crew. So like literally right there, they're shooting the TV show, and over here, as the actors are finishing over there, we're like dragging them over into here and shooting them for the web series. And Aaron Douglas, who plays the chief in Battlestar, did the most. He's really prominently featured in the websites. That guy, literally, to do that, he was working like 21 hours a day in the rain, in the cold. And then the best part was, and I never told Cory this, but we got a new camera to shoot the webisodes on. It was like super lightweight. And no one could figure out how to turn it on, and they didn't have the manual, so they're like Googling this, and Aaron's over here like, I got 3 minutes until I gotta get back to the main show, and we're like, just say this line, you like that. But we were able to like piggyback on the main production, which you really can't do anymore because now the unions have gotten involved and there's a lot more rules about it. Turns out you can't work your actors 21 hours in the rain. I know, even when they volunteer. But yeah, so that's the only way we were able to do it, is actually piggyback on the main production, because we could never pay to erect all the stuff and all that kind of stuff. So you have to find really smart ways to do it.
Okay, so I want to go down the line, and this is a question I like to ask smart folks, and just keep it light, keep it short. You guys get ready to ask questions, because that's what I love about these things. You actually get access to them to ask questions.
It's like Twitter in real life.
It is, but it can be longer. So a lot of as you guys know, a lot of the work that I do as Intel's chief futurist is to not only figure out where I think we're going and a lot of the modeling that I do, but also find out from people where they want to go. So what is the future that we want to live in? We can say we think it's going to happen this way, but I think there's something very powerful in having a conversation about where you want things to go, and having really wild requests of the future. So that's what I want to ask you as we sort of wrap this up. Craig, and I'll start with you. Or actually, I'll start with anybody who has an answer, because I know it's a sort of a big answer. What is your request of the future?
First, that it isn't there at all.
That we have one.